Awesome. Alright, so hi, what's your name and where do you live? Tell me a bit about your cultural connection with Taiwan.
Okay, so my name's Jeff. Last name is Liu, L-I-U. I'm a husband and father of 4, and we moved to Atlanta in 2017 for me, it was almost 30 years in the Bay Area. I grew up on the East Coast. My parents had emigrated here from Taiwan, starting in Indiana, but really most of my life in Delaware. And so I came from a family of 3. I have an older brother and older sister. My parents were with us till really just this last decade. Just lost my mom a year and a half ago, and my father earlier than that. But they gave me many, many wonderful memories of Taiwan, and I've had a cultural connection there essentially through my parents, but later in life through my own self-interest and support and love for Taiwan. My dad began as a student at Taida, and then eventually when he became a professor of Western civilization, he was a very popular lecturer in Taiwan, and then also did a series of history books on China and the Chinese tradition during, the advent of Western civilization. So it was a parallel series of books that he did with United Daily News, Lian Ba, and that actually won like a prize, the Jinma prize, and I remember my dad accepting that at a big ceremony. So it was, he was a big, staunch defender of Taiwan and freedom and a free Taiwan throughout his adult life, and as was my mom. And that, I think, definitely influenced us kids, but it's really the times I was able to go there and really just fell in love with the country, the people. As a child, it's a super fun place, especially in the 70s and 80s. Before really there was tech, it was just almost a playground. My parents felt safe letting me go anywhere on my own at any time of night. It's a safe country. I think people really liked Americans or like Americans. But culturally, again, so through my own family tradition, my language, I speak Chinese. I spent a 7th grade year in Taiwan where I just learned Chinese and Guohua, Chinese painting. And that was really a turning point for me in my love for Taiwan. Then I worked there in high school for the the World Trade Center in Taiwan, and then returned for business as an adult many times. And then most recently, 6 years ago, I took one of my children there as a graduation present.
Oh wow, awesome. So you mentioned that your parents have influenced your perspective on Taiwan a lot, and a lot of that comes from visiting back, visiting Taiwan. So when you were there, were there any special identity distinctions that you noticed about the Taiwanese that kind of differed from Western views?
Well, definitely different from Western. I always equated Taiwan almost with an extended family because my parents fled China like a lot of other people their age. They left their families, they never saw them again, and they really had to rely on their friends that they were escaping with, who became sisters and brothers basically, and in turn were like my uncles and aunts during my childhood and growing up. So whenever we went back to Taiwan, they would have these massive welcome back parties for my parents, 100, 200 people and big banquets, and my uncles and aunts, if you will, but also they would bring their children, my nieces and nephews essentially, and they would all basically just treat me well because I was so unusual as an American. I think that's one thing I remember, that the Taiwanese had a very strong identity, but they also really loved America and what it stood for. What I've liked to see, what I have appreciated seeing over the years is that, Taiwan and the Taiwanese have developed their own identity and culture, and I'm very supportive of that. And the idea of an independent Taiwan, I think it's a unique country of its own. It should not doesn't resemble anything in China. You could point to Shanghai or Hong Kong and compare it to Taipei, but it's just a different city because they have freedom, and you can see it in the expression, you can see it in the success of the island, etc. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you just mentioned that you spent 7th grade in Taiwan.
Yeah.
So that means, did you study there, or did you just have fun?
I was fortunate enough to be able to skip 7th grade. My school in the U.S. had been urging my parents to maybe allow me to skip a grade. They didn't want to do it because then I would be the youngest person in the grade above me. So instead, we realized that was an opportunity when they went back to Taiwan for a year for me to go back and not necessarily have a constraint of needing to go to an American 7th grade. So my parents and I decided just to have me take private Chinese lessons, and at Guoyi Zhibao, and then I taught. I had actually a very successful Chinese artist who taught me landscape and bird and flower painting. And I did that for a year. I had some talent for it because my grandfather and great-grandfather were artists in Taiwan, studied under the big Chinese masters, actually. And so I enjoyed that. So basically I painted and learned Chinese and explored Taipei. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So did you get to make I guess Taiwanese friends?
Oh yeah, there? Yeah. So we lived in a compound of professors and academics who were teaching at Taida, which is what my dad was doing during that year, sabbatical. And so there were friends, Americans and Chinese friends I became friends with in the visiting professor compound. And then all of my, quote unquote cousins and other people, would just go out of their way to take me out or to do fun things. There were a lot of Dajie and Daga who took me, eating, playing, exploring, all the night markets, the beaches, everything. Yeah.
You hit on a great point there. I feel like when I went back this year, everyone was super kind and just kind of took me in as their family.
Yeah.
And I didn't really feel excluded, although I come from literally an entirely different background.
Yeah.
Than them.
Yeah. I think that hospitality and wanting to create a familial relationship in treating you is very Chinese, but it's very Taiwanese too. I've been to, Shanghai. Now, granted, for work, I've been a lot to Shanghai and Beijing, and it just doesn't seem that the mainland Chinese people are that open and welcoming.
So, what about did you notice any differences between education styles, from your peers in the United States and your friends in Taiwan? How different was it?
Well, it was interesting. I think one of my regrets from 7th grade, or as a 7th grader, was I was against going to a Chinese school because to do that, which would have, I think, given me the gift of Chinese for life, I would have had to go to 3rd or 4th grade as a 7th grader, and I should have just gotten over that because, first of all the kids were oh, here's this big kid from America joining our class, and but it would have been great immersive study. But I was a stubborn teenager and said I would be embarrassed to do that, so I didn't end up doing that. But my parents really like they have been right many times, were right in wanting me to do that, but I didn't. Having said that, I think Chinese students in general are raised in a culture of studiousness, especially parents in my generation and a few generations below. Were very, education and being good academically was their ticket out of poverty. And in my case, my dad and mom's ticket to America. So there's always been an emphasis on learning. My parents actually were very careful not to be the strict Chinese parents. So we were never pressured by them to do well. I think there was just an assumption we would do well because we were good kids and had character and had discipline and we were self-motivated. So I can't say they had no influence, but I never felt like if I didn't do something I would get in trouble, or if I didn't do something I would get punished, either in performance or even just working. I just felt good about doing well myself. And I think that is a feeling that somehow gets instilled in a lot of Chinese kids.
Yeah, I think that sound reminds me a lot of myself, actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, recently I've been struggling with I don't know, what some might call academic motivation. Like, if my parents don't care, why should I care? Did you ever feel that? Or were you just always motivated?
I was. I grew up an American kid because I was born in the United States, and I often talk about the sitcoms like The Brady Bunch or Happy Days, and I thought that's what America represented in families. And then I, watched more things like Dallas or LA Law, and I realized what wealthy, successful Americans had, and I wanted all of that. So that became a motivation myself. Yeah.
So then, so you also mentioned that you went back 6 years ago with your eldest son.
Yeah.
So when was the last time you went back before that?
6 years prior, and then maybe for the 5 years prior to that, I probably went a couple times for business.
Are there any, I don't know, I guess, what would the word be? Has Taiwan become more westernized?
I would say it's become a global city. So the imprint of Taiwan in my head was really living there in 7th grade, and then also living there in high school. I went back for 2 summers, worked at the World Trade Center for one. And Taiwan then it was definitely not backwards, but it was definitely not as, the production Taipei. I contrast Taipei, whether it was going to the night markets or just shopping or just walking some of the grand thoroughfares. When I went back 6 years ago, and for business, I was amazed because there was nothing like Taipei 101 or these massive buildings. I think there was a period of just incredible growth for Taiwan from the 90s on, and I just love Taipei as a city because to me it's a global city. It's got
everything,
sophistication, everything. Yeah. And so I think Westerners can be very comfortable there, but they also, and I always thought this about Taipei, you could get a sense of, old Chinese traditions and culture, even in Taipei.
I definitely agree with that. That's a very good point. So then, I guess, identity-wise, do you still feel some sort of Taiwanese identity inside yourself?
Absolutely. I think I was just thinking about this on the way here. I would say that I'm, Chinese by heritage, right? We all have
Yeah.
We all identify as Chinese in that way, culturally, etc. But in terms of what forms part of my self-identity, what forms part of my political identity, definitely what forms my Asia identity is Taiwan. I would not compare myself to someone in China. I would compare myself to someone in Taiwan, or feel like, put it this way, I'd like to do a big family trip, and I want to go to Taipei over Shanghai or Beijing. Yeah.
That's awesome. So then, a bit more about like your childhood and like growing up. Were there any struggles you faced existing as, I don't know, like Asian, or just like, I guess more specifically Taiwanese, or Taiwanese?
No, I think it's funny. Just like made in Japan and made in Taiwan used to be bad labels. Now if I see something made in Taiwan over China or anywhere else, I know it's high quality. So there was that, things in Taiwan were made in Taiwan, like especially toys and things like that, were really good, but also the sorts of things that you would find in cereal boxes and things like that. So it had a little bit of that reputation. Racially, I think anybody of a race, in these days, even being Caucasian, unfortunately gets labeled a certain way. I experienced very sporadic overt racism growing up. I'm very proud to say that about America, and nothing directed specifically because of Taiwan. I remember in high school when I went back for the summer, there was another chance for me to go back for a year, but I had just entered as a scholarship student to my private school, which I love, and in fact I'm going back for a 40th reunion in a couple of weeks. But I remember talking to my friends there about, should I stay in this new school that I just joined and really liked, or should I take the opportunity to live in Taiwan again for a year? And everyone was like, oh, go live in Taiwan. It's going to be a fantastic experience. But I knew that I wanted to stay in the school to have a continuous 4 years. So, yeah. But no one has ever targeted, me because I have such an affinity or connection to Taiwan.
So you grew up so your high school times were in Delaware?
In Delaware. I lived in Wilmington, Delaware. It's Mid-Atlantic State. Went to a private school called Tower Hill School.
What about then, like, after growing up and like through your college years and post-grad years? Did you have do you feel the lack of a Taiwanese community wherever you go?
I didn't go out of my way to join cultural groups or things. I think the connection that is one of the deepest that I have with my family is around food, and so I'm always looking for a good Taiwanese restaurant, and get a big kick out of going and talking to the owners or the waiters and waitresses about whether they were from Taiwan or not. And then in my adult years, I think if there were a great opportunity to work professionally in Taiwan as a banker or as a consultant, I probably at certain points, depending on the kids and what stage they were in, really would have moved the family out there for the experience, but it just never came up. But I do look forward over the next couple decades to returning a few times with my wife and with my kids.
It's definitely going to be very fun.
Yeah, I know that.
Well, yeah. So then, what about like I guess looking back, were there any moments in your life that you've felt very proud of being Taiwanese?
Yeah. As a child, there used to be a Taiwanese acrobatic troupe that would come and perform, and Taiwan would appear in the news every now and then, and the first president I voted for was Ronald Reagan, and he and the Republican Party then were staunch defenders of Taiwan, and I was very proud that America was very proud to stand by as such a strong ally, even after what President Carter did by recognizing Taiwan. In fact, there was a moment where I felt bad to be an American. We were in Taiwan the year that Carter recognized China, and I remember I somehow, people could tell that I lived and grew up in America somehow. And I remember for a while back then, taxi drivers who I would have no concern just getting in a taxi with would drive by me in the street because
they could tell just by looking at you?
Yeah, they were angry, angry towards Carter, which was really a mistake. I suppose it had to happen, and China was going to be the player that it was, but it really did feel like we let a friend down in a big way. And so that's a big part of my memory. I remember we used to have Chinese dinner gatherings with other Chinese families, and I remember once when I was much younger, this is before Carter's decision, one of the parents in the discussion that would always take place after these dinners were like, maybe we should change our posture towards China, it's inevitable, blah, blah, blah. I remember my mom getting up and just lecturing him and all the other families about why it was important to stick with Taiwan, etc. And I remember being scared because I saw my mom and she was really, really mad. But now I understand what she was doing and how brave she was. She was a tiny woman, but how influential she was with the other parents, because it was really it's like throwing a bucket of cold water on everybody and say, look what you're actually entertaining.
Yeah. You elaborate on a great point. I think that one thing I've realized that makes us Taiwanese very, I guess identity-wise more distinct is that we all really care about Taiwan being a country. When you ask my parents, the only thing they care about when it comes to presidents is if they think Taiwan is a country or not. Right?
I can see that in Taiwanese-Americans living here.
So I think that you elaborate on that. So then, I guess any other happy memories
I have hundreds and thousands of happy memories. What did I love to do? I love going to night markets. I love chou tofu and Tainan danzimian and rougong, and I remember just all the good food. I just remember being a kid, and especially in my teen years during high school or middle school, when you're growing, I just remember being so hungry and just going to night markets and eating so many good things.
So accessible.
Yeah, and so cheap. Accessible and cheap.
Safe.
I remember just, walking the different streets of Taiwan and just exploring things. I love the Gugong, the National Palace Museum. I remember all the team at the World Trade Center who kind of adopted me like a little son or brother. And these were, they realized I was actually very good at speaking like an adult. So as a sophomore, they had me give tours in English of the World Trade Center to different visiting luminaries. And so I remember I did that for the South African Prime Minister and a few other prime ministers of countries that by that time recognized Taiwan, which were really just a handful. But it was kind of neat doing that because I was able to talk about Taiwan and Taipei and the strength of Chinese manufacturing and the World Trade Center basically displayed all the goods that were manufactured in Taiwan. Not a lot of electronics back then, like the iPhones, but like golf clubs and tennis rackets and things. And because I worked at the World Trade Center, all the different companies that had a booth there all kind of adopted me, and they would give me free their products, and that was super fun. And then last thing I really remember and love is the beaches in southern Taiwan. And I'm almost a little bit afraid to go down and see them again, because when I went to Kending and the beaches south of Kaohsiung, they're so beautiful, tropical beaches. And because a lot of Chinese don't like to sun themselves, I would be there. I had a friend visit from home, and we would be there snorkeling, and there would be just nobody on these beautiful beaches. I can't imagine it's that way now, but I just remember those beaches and the snorkeling and collecting shells. And you get all these exotic shells, basically, because of where Taiwan is. That was some of my happiest moments.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean,
of my life. Yeah.
Sounds very, very happy. Cannot imagine an empty beach nowadays.
Yeah.
Especially a beautiful one.
Yeah.
So then, Lisa, you mentioned that you worked at the World Trade Center many times, like in your high school.
Yeah.
2 years? 2 summers?
I worked there one summer.
Oh, one summer.
Yeah.
So what did you do there? I know you gave a tour.
Yeah. So they hired me. I forget why they hired me, but they wanted somebody who could speak English and speak Chinese. And my Chinese was better in high school because I was back so frequently. And to just do writing, and like I recorded video introductions of the World Trade Center, because I was the only one who had an American accent. So all the videos came out very professional because I was speaking like a narrator or a presenter. But I was really just a 10th grader.
It's very impressive.
Yeah.
Sounds very cool. So then, what about now? Like today? So what do you do?
So now, so in the 30 years of my career, I've spent all of it in technology, primarily in software, and I've had 2 different careers. One as an investment banker and one as a management consultant. So think McKinsey and Bank of America or JP Morgan. I was B of A and McKinsey and then EY. And that's when I would go to China and Taiwan. Now I'm actually in what I call the last leg of my stool, third leg of my career. And what I'm looking to do is to join a company, maybe even an early stage one in technology and AI, and be a company executive.
Awesome.
And so, yeah, there are a lot of opportunities in Asia in general, but I think invariably what I do will have some touch points with Asia and Taiwan.
So has your, I guess, identity influenced the way you work? So say, traveling back to Taiwan. Oh, this is my country.
Yeah. I always enjoy trips to Asia. Tokyo, Shanghai, Taipei, but it's always extra special to go back to Taiwan. Extra special.
That's good. So then, I guess another thing is that we wanted to ask is being able to experience both worlds, or I wouldn't say worlds, both lives in both countries.
Yeah.
A big thing of American identity is the American dream, right?
Yeah.
So do you believe that was attainable for every single American?
I do. I'm a strong believer in America, in meritocracy, in freedom, in small government, and I think those are very similar values to Taiwan, which is another thing that resonated. But as far as the potential for the American dream, I think there's always been a level playing field. It's not level for everyone in society, but I think among democratic societies, which are the best forms of government, of the democratic societies, America is still the best at trying to give everyone equal opportunity. Now, there's more we can do, but it's nowhere near as much as a place like China or Russia or even England or Germany have to go. So if you are in that broad proportion of people that actually has a chance to lift themselves up to higher and higher rungs, I absolutely believe in that. And it was strongest, I think, during the time when I could take advantage of it. So late 80s to early 2000s. I'm afraid that now there's so much division where there shouldn't be.
Division as in
political and racial lines, in demographic lines, that Americans don't realize this, but they're really throwing all these impediments into a machine of a beautiful machine of American democracy and freedom and opportunity, and they're just clogging the machine with all this, and the machine's running nowhere near as well as it did when I ran, when I was being able to take advantage of the American dream. And I can't tell you how many classmates or peers or friends of mine have done extremely well, like a few billionaires in that. And I believe that, even though I didn't reach that height, I believe there was a chance that I could have. And I'll always think that when you have a chance to do something like that, it's a better situation than when you don't.
That's right. So, and then I guess kind of wrapping up, would there be any advice you would give to your younger self?
I would have said my younger self almost went overboard with wanting to be an American because America was so great and was influenced culturally by all these things of being a successful American, that I had some blinders to this other cultural part of my life. And if I could speak to my younger self, a more general piece of advice I give is be a little bit more patient, and because life is long, you have plenty of opportunity to do different things. So don't bounce around too much. I would have said embrace your culture and go to the Chinese school, or actually proactively do something that places you in Taiwan for work. I would have taken a little bit more risk and also more vulnerability in just embracing the Taiwanese side. There's nothing ever wrong with that. Yeah.
I definitely agree. So then, I guess last question would be, name our conversation that we just had. What would be the name?
I would call it a discussion about how Taiwan and being Taiwanese, Chinese, has really made my life richer and more meaningful and given me more opportunity.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome.